everybody, welcome to Wing Talk. This is Steve, and we got the big show today. Well, this is the biggest news I think yet as far as INAV is concerned, because and I'll talk more about it in a minute with Mark, but INAV 6.0 just rolled out yesterday. So we want to find out what's new, what's different. We got a lot of questions coming already about what should we do with INAV 6.0. Is this the one I update everything to? So we're going to jump into it. As you might know, we had last week off, and because I was out of town and people were busy, so this week we were supposed to do it at 10 p.m. my time, and now it's 11 a.m. And so we just have myself and Mark here. Mark, how you doing today?
Yeah, hi Steve. I'm doing good. INAV 6 finally released. Over the last month, I took a little bit of FPV break. The weather was crap anyway, so I didn't actually really follow intensively. I haven't even flown the release candidates yet. But yeah, I had a good feeling about it. And the release so far is pretty smooth as far as I see.
Okay, that sounds good. And then we asked Henrik to jump on as well because he's like a substitute teacher, so grumpy old guy, and hopefully he'll show up. But Mark, Darren, and Luke, I guess they're out flying right now, and they're on the way back, and so it'll be a few minutes before you see them show up, right?
Yeah, at least they said they are stuck at the moment and come late. That was also the reason why the Wing Talk today is delayed by 1 hour. It unfortunately wasn't enough, but hey, maybe it's a two-man show. If Henry comes online, we have still a three-man show, and I think we can pull up some topics.
Okay, great. Well, in the meantime, we get to find out how are you doing. I mean, because before we jump into this, I know you're a dude that does a lot of stuff for the INAV Fixed Wing group, and also you've got a lot going on with the career and everything else. Is everything going well?
Oh yeah, I mean it's very stressful at my main job right now. So in the evening, I try to be for myself at the moment. That's also one of the reasons why I did some FPV break and didn't even publish new videos. Beside, of course, the weather situation. I don't know what's happening this year. It's like maybe one day during the week we have nice weather when I have to work, of course, and then at the weekend, like now again, it's raining or snowing or it's storm. It's just nasty. So yeah, 3 months in now, and not a single day flying. The last time I flew it was early December.
Wow.
So yeah, it's a while.
Yeah, I don't know what it is about. It must be the Northern Hemisphere. We've got I don't know, this year in particular, as far as storms, we actually had a lot of rain, I'd say, in December, and then it was into like the first week of January. And then it was nice for a couple weeks, cold but nice. And then it rained for like 3 more weeks to a month. It was just pretty bad. And so we've had a lot of downtime because the weather has been crap here in California as well.
Yeah, luckily in this weekend we switched back to summertime, so we have 1 hour more daylight during the week. So if there's a nice day, maybe just after work, I can go out and fly for an hour or so, and I'm not tied to the weekends anymore. That's a good thing. I like the summertime much more than winter time zones.
Yeah, you got yourself a car now, so you can throw stuff in the car and go out.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, I think I'm switching to the car about the same size as yours. I had a car that I've had since 2003 when I bought it new, and it's like I had to drive it to the airport, and we're driving it back, and my coworker needed a ride, and he's like, "Tell me, are we going to make it to my house?" It's just kind of like, I'm like, "Yeah, don't worry, I'll be fine." It's just kind of like,
I mean, you don't actually need a big car. My old Golf 4, Volkswagen Golf 4, is also pretty small. But if you don't have childs that have the child seats in the back all the time, you can just lower the back seats, and you have a big space for planes anytime. I think after I bought the plane, after I bought the car, I had to transport my second set of tires to my garage, so my back seats were down, and I think I haven't lifted them up for over a year or so. I needed the place anyway, so.
So speaking of Henrik, look who showed up. So you gotta say something.
Hi guys.
Oh, now you're out of focus. There you are.
Hi guys.
Much more handsome in person. Look at that.
Handsome, tired, well, overworked, but yeah, here I am. Yeah, thanks for the short call.
Yeah, we're kind of like, I say you're like our substitute teacher. We call you up, 4 a.m. when school starts in 2 hours. You got to be showing up. And
yeah, okay. I'm the worst teacher in the world. Absolutely the worst.
So, what's going on with Grumpy's? Go ahead.
Okay, yeah, you first.
I just want to know what's going on with Grumpy's hobbies, because everyone I think is really interested in knowing about. I mean, that's kind of like the dream for a lot of people, is to buy a hobby store or start a hobby store. So you're living the dream, right, Henrik?
Don't do it. This is the short answer. Don't do it. Don't ever think about it. Think about it, and quite do it just in your dreams. And when you're done with your dreaming, be thankful for your day job. Be thankful for all the free time you have. just don't do it. Yeah, I think. Okay, it's not that dramatic, but as you can imagine, it's a side gig, and I still have a full-time day job. And the full-time day job is, as you know, the business, a salesman and an outside salesman, and I'm on the road quite often. I drive around somewhere between 50,000 and 60,000 kilometers per year. That's I don't know how many miles that are, but it's still considerable. And to really do this hobby store thing properly requires at least, and I'm not exaggerating, at least 25 to 30 hours a week.
Yeah, I would imagine.
Add that to your normal day job and to your family life and to your hobbies you want to follow and etc. So I'm not I'm not in a very, very beneficial situation because I live in Germany, and of course Germans love their regulations, and it doesn't come as a surprise that most of the tax literature is actually written in German, world's tax literature, and the authorities gave me quite a few headaches, and they still are, but well, we still managed to get all the pre-orders out last week. Wow. So yeah, we're done with the pre-orders. Most of them are already with the customers. I'm really, really surprised. DHL did a really good job.
So is that just in Europe, or is that in the United States as well?
Worldwide.
Well, so there's, as I remembered, you're sending like some batches to Chris.
Yes.
In Arizona.
Yeah.
And then you had some pre-orders that you're getting out. And is that just for the pre-orders? Was that for just the worldwide, or is just for EU? Because I think you were covering EU and Chris was covering the United States, or just
yes, exactly. Chris is covering the American continents, both North and South America, and so just as a general rule, of course, if there is some customer who just wants to order from Chris, I won't stand in the way. Of course, if there is a customer that wants to buy from me, I don't think Chris will stand in the way. But there's obviously the big elephant of shipping in the room, and we are talking about somewhere about $40 to $50 to send a box over the pond. So that is a considerable investment. So I picked up all the foam at the factory first. And then I shipped 50% of the foam parts to Chris in a big mess of boxes.
So I got a question to ask you. When you picked up this foam, you got to tell it straight. That people have been waiting years for this. And is the foam as good as it was in the past?
No.
It's not?
It's better.
It's better. Oh my gosh.
Yeah, really, it's better. Really.
Proper molding is the key.
Yeah, proper molding is the key. And the thing is, I got a mini drag from a few years ago, and there were on the top where the lids are attached, there were a few beads of the foam exposed and not really pressed into each other. And with this batch, I touched I touched a few hundred of them, and there was not a single one that had this problem. I don't remember seeing any of those planes that didn't pass my generous German quality issues.
Quality inspection. Okay.
Yeah. It didn't. It is really, really good. And we in the past we often had bent wings that were like in a wave form or just twisted, etc. We still have twisted wings. We still have a little bent wings because it's natural, because they are tempered in big ovens for a week or so. And when they are laying on the top of each other, they get a little curvature. That's completely normal. But it wasn't in that high extent as I've seen it before. So this batch, I can wholeheartedly say, is the best batch of mini drags that has ever been.
That's good to hear, because I talked to somebody who got one a couple of years ago, and this was somebody who's more into the UAV community, commercial UAV, like for military, and he said like he found a lot of open cells, so almost like it had not been, when they put the foam in there when it's in molten state, it was like the temperature might have been wrong, so we had some expanded cells. So it sounds like this time they got that fixed.
Yeah, actually, the thing is, it's not comparable to the way the Chinese I'm sorry, the Chinese do mold their foam planes, because the foam comes pre-expanded, like in 80% of its later state, and it will be then injected into the mold with hot steam and with high pressure. And so if the pressure is not right, or the temperature is not right, then we have the problem with non-expanded beads. So yeah, and this time it was absolutely spot on. I'm really, really proud of it. Okay. And yeah, let's just be absolutely curious as I am, who will up the first flying video of my tracks. So, okay, but let's not turn this into an advertisement show for new planes.
We're not going to talk about radios. We're not going to talk about right wing. Okay.
Let's talk about Mark's new beard. The beard is getting longer.
Yeah.
Yeah, a little bit. I mean, and it's grayer. It's a lot of gray. You don't see that on the camera right now, but it's getting more. Yeah. No, but I mean, one thing should be certain, that the new mini drag builds will hopefully run on INAV 6, and I mean that's why we are here today, or that's our main topic today. INAV 6 was released yesterday. Pavel hit the button, and I want to point out that in the chat we have some guy, Kryton FPV. He is right now in this minute flying while he watches our live stream. So he put some trust in INAV 6, I see, and I think that's a good thing.
Ask him to make a roll for me. I want him to roll, and then just let him know that he completed it, and we'll applaud for him.
I'm super excited for INAV 6. I mean, when I had a little more time, I was Mark asked me if I could test fly one of the first iterations of the new AHRS, and it was the Audio Pilot ported one, I think. Yeah. And I can really remember when the artificial horizon indicator was doing loopings in the OSD. So We've come a long way. We've come a long way, and I'm flying on RC3 like a few hours now, and I have never had such a reassuring experience with INAV like I have with RC3, and I'm really pumped to fly on the release on the final version of 6.0.
Behind all that AHRS stuff, there's also an interesting story. I think we have a few minutes to tell it now. In the past, I mentioned it a little bit, but I really want to point that out. There was that first guy, I think it was Julio Cesar Matthias or Matthias, not sure how you pronounce the name, sorry for that. Yes. And I think it was shortly after 4.1 dropped. And what he wanted to do was fix the horizon drift. And his idea, it wasn't a bad idea, actually very clever. I mean, the main work on that was already done by the Autopilot developers. We know that Autopilot for years had no issues with horizon drift, unless you have very bad hardware, of course. So what he tried to do, he took the oldest generation of the Autopilot AHRS. I cannot exactly remember what the name was. Maybe the Papa Noob can put it in the chat. It's not the Kalman filter, extended Kalman filter. It was the older one before that. He took the code from Autopilot and managed to port it over with base functionality within just 2 weeks, while other developers said porting that over would take months of works, and that was already very impressive. Yeah. There were a lot of issues still with the right scaling, because Autopilot in its overall code base, because it's such a big project and such an old project basically, did a lot of patching in the past, some workarounds in the code to match something or some new changes. It's basically a chaos in there. And when he ported it over, it took a while until it works in a baseline, but for some reason it only worked when you're really cruising around only. As soon as you fly aerobatics, it completely fell apart, and the horizon line was all over the place at in the final stages he had. And unfortunately, he was never able to get this problem fixed. It was something with the z-axis acceleration that was inverted somewhere in the code and then inverted on another end in the Autopilot code, but he couldn't really figure out how to fit that in INAV. And just a few months after he started his work with porting the AHRS from Autopilot, another developer came up with a pull request. I told him, hey, put that out in a pull request. Don't just do it in your own. Put out the pull request, let other developers participate on that, look at the code, etc., etc. And a few days before I convinced him to finally raise the PR, that developer Shota Hayashi from Japan came and put a pull request up himself. But he didn't port anything. He, from scratch, implemented the math that Autopilot uses for the GeForce compensation and coded it from scratch and upgraded the existing AHRS. And back then when I saw that, I thought, okay, this could fix the AHRS issue, but with Julio's approach, we would take much more stuff over from Autopilot, like the better wind estimator, better navigation handling, like turn planning. That would all be ported over if that worked. So I tried to convince to drop his approach and work with Julio and on the Autopilot code port. But at the end, he said, "No, I will try my own thing. Whatever works best can then later be implemented, or we decide what will be implemented at the end." Yeah, but then unfortunately, the Autopilot code port completely stuck. we couldn't fix the problem, and then I focused on Shota's implementation. And interestingly, after his implementation started to work, and this was what came into the feature preview 1 to test that in a big test environment, then other developers jumped on it. There was Bredhoven, who optimized the wind estimator, for example. Then there was another developer who decided to optimize the navigation based on that new HRS and the new wind estimation. So everything came together, and the end result was that we have the original INAV HRS upgraded with full GeForce compensation, and all the other stuff that would have taken over from Autopilot was just done by other developers based on that. So we have the same feature set that we would have with the ported code, but it's original INAV code and not just taken over from other developers. And this is a very big thing in my opinion. And I'm really happy how that turned out at the end. And the results we can see in many, many flight videos and many, many happy pilots, even during the feature preview phase and even during the release candidate phase.
Yeah, it's kind of funny is that it was about a year ago, I think. It was a young Henrik here decided that one day he got frustrated. He's laughing right now. He knows exactly what I'm about to say. He got really frustrated at the fact that we did not have Artificial Horizon that worked properly, and he put a post up and called out Powell, and that started about a week worth of fighting going on between everyone in the background. It was just kind of like, it was really horrible. And we were like trying to figure out how do we raise money, because what Powell basically told us was it's going to take months of work, a lot of math we don't even have, and it essentially what will happen is we're going to try, and it might not work, but I kind of want to get compensated for all the time I'm going to put into this. So, that was, and we were trying to figure out how we were going to raise money. We were going to have like a cookie sale or bake sale in INAV, trying to make enough, come up with, realistically, the number I was thinking of, it started off at $10,000 and might have gone as high as $100,000. So to have all this done for free is, there's somebody who put some major work into this. So the appreciation to these guys is absolutely spectacular.
Yeah, I would absolutely second that, because I'm absolutely happy with Horizon Hawk as a brand name for INAV 6. Although I really loved the numbers only. So okay, I'm happy with Horizon Hawk, but this is such a big thing. INAV 6 is such a big thing. It's really like an absolute different experience. I also would have liked to have Shota somewhere in that name. For my personal point of view, I think he's too humble for that. But we can't thank him enough. We cannot do it. We cannot thank him enough, because he basically solved from my perspective, the major problem with INAV. And there are a few hiccups still, but it's basically a complete new experience. So let's all applaud Shota, please applaud him, and find
yes. Hooray.
Okay.
Domo arigato.
Yes.
I don't even try it. There's also another good example about that. For about a year, or I think it all started short after the 4.1 release. I'm working with a Canadian company as kind of consultant. They do wildlife control on landfills and airports in Canada, and they also have to follow a lot of regulations. Especially, they are basically flying drones at airports, but in a commercial way, in a legal way, of course. But they have a lot of regulations, like stuff they are not depending on the airport, like they are not allowed to fly higher than 50, 60 meters, on some airport 80 meters, something like that. They also have to make sure that if they have any technical issues, that the planes turn around, all that stuff. They worked with INAV 4.1 first, and 5 and 5.1 as well. It was working pretty good with the programming framework. I helped them to implement some features like a geofencing for the pilots, because they only fly line of sight, and they fly planes like the AR Wing Pro, the AR Wing 900, and one of these bird planes that really looks like a falcon, just to scare other birds away that land on the runways, for example, or try to find food on the landfills where they could get poisoned. Basically, that's the reason why they do that. They usually started with falcons, with real falcons, trained ones, but of course they cannot do that all day long. They have to rest sometimes, and real falcons are very, very expensive to train. So yeah, they went into drones a little bit. And a while ago, the team leader of that drone wildlife management department, he started to use INAV 6 on his test setup with a release candidate, and he says it's a different, like day and night. It's so much less overshooting when the geofences hit, for example. We also now started to implement LiDAR sensors in the planes. I tested it first with my test setup here with a short 8-meter LiDAR sensor for the auto-land stuff I was experimenting with. And now we got a 40-meter LiDAR, and they will use that for minimum altitude above ground level, for example. And having a reliable, stable horizon all the time, so the plane exactly knows its attitude, is absolutely essential. For example, if the horizon is tilted down and the pilot at the same time is descending, it takes much longer to catch up with the geofencing before the plane starts rising again, if the horizon is tilted, than when it's actually level. So this is very important, especially if you have a minimum altitude like 10 meters above ground, and for some reason the pilot loses a little bit of orientation. It can decide, or it can be a different outcome if the horizon is stable and the plane is able to catch before it hits the ground, or if the plane hits the ground near a runway, for example. Because if that happens, if the plane crashes onto the runway, they have to go there, they have to get it, they have to look around for pieces that are possibly there that can actually interfere with the airport traffic, and that's just must not happen. And this is really a thing where INAV 6 is very important to massively reduce the risk of that happening.
The one thing I wanted to bring up was kind of how I think INAV is kind of the prototype of what a successful but open source project should look like, from the extent that Mark I think both of you guys were around in the very beginning when we started the group. My imagination was INAV when like around 2.0, 2.1, was INAV really kind of like beta flight with GPS at the time, and the fixed wing stuff was kind of an interesting side project, kind of like the rover project. Maybe it'll work, maybe it won't work. What do you think about that?
I think that's
Mark?
more a question for Mark, because
yeah.
I think I came a little later. I came 2018, somewhere at the end of 2018.
The group started at the end of 2018. It was December of 2000.
Okay. Yeah, then I'm pretty much
right. So it's the way I saw it was that, essentially what happened was we, as a group, started out really, it was the fixed wing stuff. It was some people had figured it out. Some people were able to make it work. It didn't work really well, as far as there was just a lot of hoops to jump through. There's a lot of little stuff that if you hadn't followed the steps, you could make it work. And Mark was really like one of the first people to say, here's all the steps you need from point A to point Z follow these steps and you can make INAV work on your plane. It will work pretty well, but it's not going to be perfect, right? Does that sound fair to say?
Yeah, I mean, you can do so much with what you have. I'm that kind of person. I always try to get everything possible out of stuff I buy, for example. Yeah, with INAV, it's basically the same thing. I buy a flight controller, I buy a plane, and then I try to set up and try out everything I can do with that. Just to get the most out of it without spending a ton of money. Of course, I could when I do want to, or when I want to build a camera drone, I could strap a GoPro to a Chinese camera gimbal and build a INAV copter with DIY parts and fly around, or maybe with autopilot, and then add sensors like ultrasonic sensors or LiDAR sensors to make optical avoidance, all that stuff, for maybe 500, 600 euros. Or I could do the same and just buy a DJI drone, for example. But then I say, when I buy a DJI drone, I'm limited to what the drone comes with, and I pay much more money than when I do the stuff myself. And I can extend it like I want. I can get much more out of it. Sometimes, even with INAV, with a programming framework, you can do your own stuff with it. The developers haven't even taken into consideration, just as an example. So yeah, making the most out of the reduced stuff or the limited stuff I have is basically a goal. And that was the same reason why, when I started with INAV, I looked very thoroughly in every feature and every functionality to understand how it works in the background. And this, of course, helps to fine-tune it, to adjust it, to optimize it as good as possible. And yeah, at the end, I started to share that in the group, in the community, and that's the way it went over the last years.
And that was the reason why we were able to really, I think, take the group from where it was to where people wanted to play with it. Then, people all of a sudden, they saw like, hey, we can make this work if we follow these recommendations. Some people are better at it than others at following your instructions. But the thing is that it attracted people. The other thing that happened was the group, we were not about tribalism at all. We did not, we invited the drone community in. If you want it, your next quad should be a plane. And here's all the stuff to try it out. And we got a lot of guys who came in and said, wow, this works. And they can get it to fly. And they're pretty excited about it. I mean, I think we got to around INAV, it was like 2.5, 2.6. That was really started to be something where it was, a lot of people who had some basic drone experience for building it with Betaflight could come in and get a plane to fly. Wasn't always perfect, but they can get it to fly, and their first flying experience went pretty well, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I started myself somewhere around 1.9, 2.0. So feed forward was already a thing, and the basic fixed string functionality was there. The fixed string part of INAV back then, when I started, was, I would say, rudimentary. It was still, you could clearly see in the functionality and how it's set up that it was coming from multi-rotor control, from multi-re, and clean flight. But and after that, with every version, you really saw that also that shift, that more and more focus was given on the fixed string part actually. I mean, for me, I personally like that. Other people's might not like it that much, but at the end, we want to have a navigation system that can do both as good as it can. And now that we also get rover and boat control, it's also just rudimentary, but who knows what comes in the future.
So the first thing he did was, when we wrote the manual, I remember Powell got a look at it and he's like, wow, this is really good. So that was kind of like they stopped and took notice. At that point, it was pretty much Powell was always talking about Betaflight at the time. And the fixed wing side was never really something that we're like, yeah, this is the main thing to bring in people. But, a couple things happened. The pandemic happened, and there was a lot more time. People had time off. And because of that, we actually, and I think it was kind of the inclusive nature of the group, where we had a lot of the people who had time on their hands who were able to help out with the project quite a bit. The one thing that really, in my mind, kind of clinched the deal for us as a group, and really what took what I believe to be INAV to the fixed wing level, was there was a problem we had, and it was an ongoing problem for years, which was there was a problem with FR Sky receivers.
Our channel glitch problem.
The channel glitch problem, right. And we had no idea what it was, and it was a problem with the INAV. All of a sudden, you're flying, and the next moment, the plane is disarmed, right? And then you're like freaking out and crashing, and then I was trying to explain to people, this is how you rearm a plane, because what you do when the plane disarms is you put the throttle all the way up, and you're like moving the sticks, and the sticks still move, but the throttle's not re-engaging, and you don't understand why. And when you engage, you have to take the throttle all the way down, which is something you want to do when you're like heading toward the ground. Then you got to disarm and rearm, and then put the throttle back up, and hopefully you can save it.
Yeah, I mean, it wasn't actually an INAV. Oh, okay, it was an INAV problem, but INAV was, as we know, not the cause of the problem. That was actually an issue in the implementation on the FrSky ACCST firmware side. That when you had a failsafe and the failsafe recovers, it was basically one half of the channels, 8 of the 16 channels, glitching to 0. Like with a 50-50 chance. With a 50-50 chance if it happens, and then a 50-50 chance what channel range glitched. And this could cause the disarms. We had some mitigations then in place on the INAV side, like that arming was delayed by 100 or 200 milliseconds. So if you disarm, it took 200 milliseconds before the disarm was actually executed. But that didn't solve some other side effects. For example, what I had when I fly a waypoint mission, and I set INAV to ignore failsafe during mission flight, and then this glitch happens, you have a short mode switch. And this mode switch causes the mission to stop working and switch into acro mode and stay at acro mode at that point. Wow. So it was very annoying back in the day.
Yeah. But that was the thing that was amazing about that moment was, at the time I was flying my AR wing with XM Plus receivers and 2.4 gigahertz. So I was constantly testing the boundaries of failsafe. So there was no one in the group that was fail-safing more than me. And then finally one day I said, Mark, I've got the logs and I got the video. And Mark looked at the logs and he said, well, I just disarmed here. Don't know what's going on. But he saw in the video, he goes, I know what's going on. And then this was a Friday evening, I remember, Friday my time. And all of a sudden it was like Mark and Darren were like talking in the background to Paul and a couple other guys who were developers. And you could see all of a sudden, like, everything took off. It was just like, man, we've been trying to figure this out for years. And here it is. We got the solution. And the guys who figured it out. And it was just like the greatest feeling. I was like, oh my gosh, we're about to go to the next level. We're starting to, being taken seriously as, we're no longer just, INAV was a beta flight clone with GPS. All of a sudden, the fixed wing community side is something that will bring people into INAV. And that's kind of what happened. When we saw more and more people come in to INAV through the fixed wing side, then all of a sudden, we were taken a lot more seriously. And it was, I think, also the help from Mark and Darren and some other people in the group who really attracted the developers to listen to us and work with us. And then from there, we're able to attract other people. And, the all-inclusive nature of like where everyone could jump in, everyone could be a part of the INAV development if you feel like it. I think that worked pretty well for us.
Yeah. There's, by the way, also a question in the chat right now from JD. Any future scope for RTK integration and distance-based shutter control? He explained then that real-time RTK is real-time kinematics, highly accurate accurate positioning database. If I understand that correctly, I think what you are looking for is a inertial navigation system, basically based on gyro and accelerometer data to estimate a position change based on that. This is already implemented in INAV, at least for multi-rotors. I think it's also partially active now for fixed wings because these data are used for the G-force compensation and the new IHRS now. So I think I'm not sure if there will be any more work on that, because the reason is just the sensors that we have are not accurate enough for more long time acceleration based navigation we have too much sensor variance, too much noise in them on our hobby grade sensors that won't really work. There are other things, like when you take the Pixar Cube, for example, they use multiple sensors at the same time. They fuse them together for filtering and stuff like that. They get much more precise data to realize something like that, and they can basically hold their position just based on accelerometer and movement data for minutes or without GPS fix, for example. But we won't see that on INAV, not on the hardware INAV is targeted at. And regarding the distance-based shutter control, you can do that already. I don't think that the developers will implement a native feature here, because that would just load up the code for something you can already do with the programming framework. Because Darren made a very nice addition to INAV 6 and the programming framework, where you can use waypoints as triggers. That was basically also my idea to realize my auto landing. And with that, you can use waypoints to trigger your camera. You can also use the distance to the next waypoint or the distance from the previous waypoints to trigger certain actions. Or, like you can also count the travel distance up with the global variable, then send a shutter signal to your camera and then reset that counter and then start to count again. So you could have photos shot at very specific distances, no matter how fast or in what direction your craft is flying. That's totally doable with the programming framework right now.
Okay, so right now it's like we're getting on about 17 minutes to the break. And what I'd like to do is at some point we'll have a break. Maybe it'll be a little bit early, and then we'll jump into your whole overview of INAV 6.0. But until that point, what I want to know, and this is a crucial question. There's a lot of guys out there who have planes. They might have some planes on INAV 3.0. Some might have it on INAV 4.0. And it works, right? And it works pretty well, and they're happy with it. And there's some guys who, will put INAV 6.0 on everything regardless. But is this the firmware where you say across the board, let's just put everything? INAV 6.0 is like a must.
Absolutely. I mean, Darren also already said that there is absolutely no reason not to update unless you have a F3 flight controller. That would be the only reason if you have some really ancient hardware. Beside that, there's no reason not to update, and you only benefit from it. I mean, if I get a little bit cynical, I would say that every question in the INAV fixed wing group about INAV with an older version should now only be answered with update to 6.0.
It's kind of funny, but I mean, what we get is, I think, especially if you get people who are coming in from the fixed wing side, who've line of sight, if they get something that works for them, they don't want to fix it. And so, I mean, you'll see that with transmitters. Like, they'll have a firmware on there from 5 years ago, and it's like, oh, this is perfect for me, and I'm never going to touch it. And we're always about, you should update your firmware. And when you deal with INAV, this is an open source project. And what we're trying to do is completely fix it every single time. Every version should be something that's celebrated. And in the past, we've had, I don't know, if we went from INAV 4.0 to 5.0, maybe there wasn't enough there to say this is a really compelling reason to come in to switch everything over to INAV 5.0. It's going to take too much work. Might not be worth the effort. But this is different, right?
Yeah, in my opinion, it totally is. I mean, in the past years, sometimes I had the feeling from one INAV version to another, new features like stumble in a way that it's working okay, or then there are problems in INAV that were solved with some kinds of weird workarounds or mitigations. Just take the horizon drift stuff. Yes, 5.0 and 5.1 had very good mitigations for the drifting, but it had the side effect that if you have a plane that suffers from a lot of drift due to G-forces and due to its aerodynamics, it couldn't loiter forever. It could just loiter for a few rounds or a few minutes, and then it starts to waving more and more until it's at some point hits the ground, or it starts to make weird patterns in the sky instead of a nice circle. So yeah, we stumbled from workaround to workaround to workaround, and new features kind of worked, and sometimes were fixed later. But this time it's really different. I mean, just take the waypoint tracking method that Bredhoven has developed. He came up with that, I think, shortly before Feature Preview 1 dropped. And in Feature Preview 1, the first iteration he had in there was like, yeah, okay, the plane tries to get back on the line between the waypoints instead of flying direct to the next one. It kind of works. It always snakes a little bit a few times before it finally hits a line. And then a few of us said, no, that's crap. That's not really usable. We have to rework that. And then it was reworked. A new method was implemented completely. The turn smoothing at waypoints, like right now, or in 5.1, waypoints for fixed wings were flown by just hitting the waypoint straight on. And after that, after the waypoint is directly hit, then INAV looks, oh, okay, where's the next one? Okay, I have to make a right turn now, and it makes a big loop and then flies to the next one. There's now a method for turn smoothing where INAV sees, okay, this is the waypoint I have to fly to, but the next waypoint is over there. So I plan a turn either outside or inside, depends of your setting, where INAV goes first a little bit left and makes a nice turn around that waypoint where it's supposed to be, or it cuts the corner inside without directly passing it to make nice smooth navigation turns and follow the waypoint path as good as a fixed wing can do. And then this was released and put in the code, but there still were issues with that snaking. And we said again, no, that's not how it should work, and that's not clean enough. And he did another rework, and after then it's pretty much perfect. You get some snaking. You get basically every time the plane tries to navigate to the path, it does one overshoot, so it crosses the line, flies back, and realigns. But that's currently not possible to have better with the current way INAV navigates. That would need a complete revamp of the navigation system itself. But we are really, really close right now. And other features like the return trackback is also such an example where before, he looked more on quadcopters, for example. It was planned to just have it as an emergency mode. But a few people said, why only emergency? Hey, let's do that for return to home. Even for quads, you can do it return to home. Let's assume you fly line of sight, for example. You lose your sight to the plane because you fly behind trees. You don't have a fail-safe, but you still want the plane to come back, or the quad, the multirotor, fly back that route to get away from these trees, as an example.
Can you, just to interrupt you, Mark, I really love this RTH trackback feature, and I just watched Darren's video on INAV 6.0, and he said, okay, but if you are flying through a ridge or a canyon or something, and the canyon is smaller than your loiter radius, you will inevitably hit a wall.
Yeah.
And that's bad luck. That's unfortunate. Couldn't you just say that if the plane was agile enough and you are flying on like 60% throttle for cruising,
flying Immelmann back.
You do an Immelmann. An Immelmann, for those who don't know an Immelmann, it's an inverted split S, meaning you just do a half loop and roll over at the top.
Right now, this is not possible.
Okay,
even if
do this. I want an Immelmann.
I mean, in theory, you can program that if you want with the programming feature. You could do that actually with the programming feature. If I think about it, would need some work, but you could program actually a flight pattern with that. But the problem with that is, as far as I know, the navigation system does not allow any angle above 90-degree bank, for example. So you cannot get the plane upside down at all. And if as soon as this happens, you get a gyro lock in the software, and the plane will basically, as soon as it goes vertical, it would instantly flip around and then not know what to do and go up like this.
But you could, of course, then program it as such that this functionality you were just describing is halted for like 2 seconds until the maneuver is done.
Yeah, what you could do is if a failsafe appears, you could check. You go full throttle, pull back, do that Immelmann manually in acro mode, and then you can look at the log. How long was your full throttle? How long was your pitch back, roughly? And then you program that with the new timer feature in the programming framework. So if you get a failsafe, you just go into angle for a moment to level out. Then you go into acro, repeat these steps to make that Immelmann, and then you switch into return to home. That would work. The plane should roughly behave the same all the time, and even if it's a little bit off, even if it's like 45 degrees off at the end, it doesn't matter, because return to home will do the rest.
Okay, I want video footage of that. that guy who does this first, I want video footage of that.
I think I try that with the Bixler, maybe. Yeah, that would be an idea. I mean, I've seen people doing that with autopilot or autoplane, actually. With the how's it called? The Lua programming. Autopilot has Lua script support, and there are people scripting basically aerobatic maneuvers, and then just flick a switch, and then a whole chain of maneuvers is executed automatically.
Yeah. I see in the chat, Mr. Batch said, and each pilot also needs enough thrust to do an Immelmann. Of course, I just assume that you should use a plane that is able to do an Immelmann, and all those heavy long-range planes might be struggling a little with that. But come on, guys, buy a mini drag.
So a question I have for you, this is more of something like think about long term. This is I got maybe a rhetorical question. Commercial was run quite a few years ago here in the United States about, I believe it was from Mercedes-Benz, and they were talking about it was either their braking system or their passive restraint system. And they talked about how Mercedes had a patent on this, but they decided not to enforce it because they felt it was too important not to share. So one thing I've been noticing is that when people go into people at the flying field who don't have the benefit of using a plane with a flight controller, But I'll take that back. They do use flight controllers. They use them for stabilization. They have some pretty advanced flight controllers that are not probably that much different from what we're using, but they're mainly for stabilization, things like a Cortex or AR Smooth Flight. What happens, though, is they go into a turn, they get into the null. One of two things happens. Either they lose, go into fail-safe through the turn, or they go through something, as Moss was talking about last time, where you're flying by something and you get swamped. The signal gets swamped. So for a couple seconds, the plane goes into fail-safe. And would you guys be opposed to having, when we get this perfected, is actually sharing it with people who sell these things on a commercial basis, just for the fact that they can, for a few seconds, they can get their plane to avoid fail-safe? Mark looks completely stumped.
I'm a little bit confused exactly what you mean. You mean to install basically a flight controller with fail-safe feature even on a full manual plane?
Well, no, these planes have flight controllers in them already. So AR Smooth Flight is like a flight controller. It's missing GPS or something where it can just kind of keep the plane flying for long enough so that the plane gets a few seconds to regain radio control using my competitor's products.
Yeah,
we already have that.
I mean, what we have right now, if you don't have a GPS installed, you have the land option that will basically level out the plane and set it in a fixed bank angle with a pitch down, and so it circuits down in case of a permanent fail-safe.
If I understood Steve correctly, that was not his point. I think it was about keeping the plane aloft in its current vector, just and speed. Just to wait
long enough to hopefully get radio range back.
For a defined amount of time to regain radio control again.
Yeah, but that's already the case because I think fail-safe in INAV by default kicks in after 0.5 seconds. But you can set that for longer, and then the last command will just execute it before the fail-safe comes. By the way, I have a question, or I have a statement from Maxun1 in the chat. You need a plane with 2-to-1 thrust ratio to do that Immermann thing. I have a riddle for you. How do gliders do an Immermann? They don't have a 2-to-1 thrust ratio. No, you don't need that. Yeah. Absolutely not. I mean,
another fun fact. If you Google Mr. Immelmann, you will find the plane he has done it first with, and that one has a, let's say, 3-to-1 weight to thrust ratio. So
it's about the same as my Bixler, for example, and it's totally doable.
The same argument. You need speed. You need speed. You need air speed. And,
of course, if you have it also depends on the airframe. Of course, if you have a plane that has like high drag or very high weight, it also depends if you pitch up too fast. For example, you basically do a handbrake mid-air when you pull up, and then you won't have the speed anymore. You also need to have it at the right pitch rate to not lose too much speed.
There is also one thing that is also overlooked is the distance between the center of lift and the center of gravity of the plane. If you have, for example, a Bixler or my beloved Easy Star 3, for example, they don't really like loopings. They need immense amounts of thrust and motor power and airspeed to actually do a looping, because the center of lift is so far above the center of gravity of the plane. So it needs tremendous amounts of force to get it actually around. That's a good thing, because these planes are considered beginner planes, and you learn actually how to do actual flying in manual, which most people are these days are afraid of. I reckon. But you learn flying manual with these planes, and that's rather easy because the center of lift is so far high above the center of gravity. You just cannot fuck up.
Yeah, so as an example, when I'm just in cruise speed with the AR Pro, for example, I cannot do an Immermann. There's no chance, because you have center of lift and center of gravity on a delta wing so close to each other that if you pitch up, the whole plane gets an air brake. You lose so much speed if you try to climb rapidly. On the other hand, with the Bixler, I'm not sure if it works in cruise speed, like 40 kilometers per hour, but I don't think so. Even with full throttle, it won't be able. With the drift, for example, I know it works, because the drift has very wide wings, is very nose heavy in most of the cases, so it pulls itself through the turn and keeps its speed. So I can, and with the high pitch rate the drift has, I can really turn around even at cruise speed 40, 50 kilometers per hour, no problem at all. And that also has a thrust ratio of, or rate to thrust ratio of 3-1 or so.
Yeah, I'm spending a lot of time in the flying fields watching guys fly turbine jets, and they do. Immermann is one of the things that they frequently do. Even though there's turbine jets, or it costs about as much as a Honda Civic, or about as large as a Honda Civic, I still say, knowing what I know about the turbine pilots and then the people who fly gliders are a lot more sophisticated. There's so much more, skill.
If you talk about planes like these jets and these very big, heavy escape planes, the chance is higher to rip off the wings when you try that. Sometimes.
Oh my God!
I have to object. Gliders are boring.
I don't know how they keep those wings attached, but those guys will fly in the field, and they do. I mean, they actually now they have vector thrusting, so they're doing. They will stop in the middle of the field and spin around and do all sorts of things. So they're flying in 3D. It's amazing to watch. So I think Mark.
So like these scale jets, these big scale jets that are still made of balsa, most of it. There are videos on YouTube. There's one very famous one with the Eurofighter, I think, where suddenly the rudder completely disintegrates. The plane starts to tip over or pitch up, and then rips both wings off. The whole plane disintegrates mid-air.
It was a Draken. It was a sub-Draken from the Norwegian Air Force.
Ah, okay, yeah.
But he completely fucked up because he built it out of wood and not enough composite in it. If you have a turbine jet of that scale, you need carbon fiber. You need carbon fiber, and you need Kevlar. You need the best composites to hold the forces. Actually,
there's that guy in the INAV Fixed-Wing group who actually builds jets with turbines, and he puts INAV in there for basic stabilization in acro mode. He does not FPV them, just flies them line of sight. But one thing he also uses, as far as I know, or he asked me at least, I'm not sure if he managed to pull it off, he uses INAV to measure the G-forces during flight, and sends that back to the radio to get a warning on the radio if the G-forces get too high. And I think he also wanted to know if he can basically have a G-force limiter. And actually, with INAV, that is possible. I think you can use the G-force values in the programming framework. And based off that, if the G-forces on the Z-axis, for example, gets over a certain threshold, you can make an override for the pitch axis to reduce the pitch input to not overstress your airframe. That should be possible.
I had a pretty interesting conversation on exactly this topic with one of the employees of a shop that I get my composite stuff from, and he's actually a plane designer himself, a model plane designer himself, and he knows the guy who just set the new world record for dynamic soaring.
Oh yeah,
and he had it's incredible what they do with those planes. But the real fun fact was they have an accelerometer in the airframe too, but it maxes out at 150 G.
Oh God!
So they actually don't really know how many Gs they are pulling in those turns. because the accelerometer is maxed out for like 2/3 of the flying time. So they are expecting, they did a little calculations here and there, and they say, okay, we might have topped 200 Gs in those turns dynamic soaring. So imagine that. Imagine 200 Gs with a model airplane.
God, that's crazy. Well, I tell you what, we're going to do right now is we're going to take a break for a few minutes, and then we're going to come back. And Mark's going to get into INAV 6.0. We'd love to have Darren and be here with us along with Luke, but it's past 8 o'clock their time, so they're stuck somewhere. Don't know what's going on. Mark's going to get right into it, and we'll be back in 3 minutes. Thanks. Hang on, everybody. Okay, everybody, we're back. Welcome back to Wing Talk. So, INAV 6.0 was released yesterday. Excuse me. I get choked up about it, so I'm emotional about it now. What is exciting about this is that, believe it or not, I was born on March 25th, 2002. So yesterday was my 21st birthday. And the guys were like all trying to figure out what to do as far as, we got to do something big for Steve for his 21st birthday. So they were planning to get me a Mercedes-Benz, but they're about $50,000 shy. So They said, we're going to name this INAV S21. S for Steve and 21 for his 21st. Is that what they were doing, Mark?
Not quite.
All right, so maybe they weren't doing it for me. They call it Horizon Hawk. It's the newest version of INAV. It's 6.0. This is the biggest version of INAV, and this is the moment you've been waiting for. What exactly is this all about? Mark Hoffman, take it away.
Yeah, I think we don't have to talk about every single feature of INAV 6. We already took a few. Darren also made a fantastic video about it on his channel. It went live today at 2 p.m. UTC. And he goes very deep into detail about all the new features. I just posted a link in the chat as well, so people can have a look at our website, the inavfixedwinggroup.com website, to see what these features are with all the descriptions. If there are any questions, put them in the chat. I try to answer as good as I can. And yeah, as we already talked about, we have the new AHRS. No horizon drift, better navigation, more stable flights. That's the biggest thing of all, especially because many of the other features are based on that. And more features coming in the future will also only be possible because of that new AHRS. There's one nice thing in the works. I think we talked about that earlier already, and that's the Dead Reckoning navigation, where INAV, even with a complete loss of GPS connection, even a GPS peripheral failure, if your GPS disconnects or smokes or whatever mid-flight, INAV will be able to navigate back home or close to home, so you can take over control and land safely. This is also a very big thing. It wasn't quite ready for 6.0, but it will likely come with 6.1 in May, if all goes well. Yeah, we have return to home trackback. We talked about that before, just to clear any obstacles if you get a fail-safe and not crash into a mountain you fly behind. Landing detection optimized for quads and implemented for fixed wings. Very cool feature, very good safety feature, especially on the flying field. Sometimes you might know that you are talking to someone, maybe as a bystander, just asking you questions. Then you land your plane and you continue talking, and then you get the plane, you lift it up, you bump the stick, and suddenly the motor goes off because you forgot to disarm. And landing detection by default in INAV 6 will always disarm your plane after landing, like a few seconds later. This is a very nice safety feature, and also protect your hardware, of course, if you have a fail-safe outfield landing, just that the motor doesn't continuously start to spin again.
Just a small detail, does it also prompt that mode of disarming in the reports later?
Yeah, it will be a normal disarm. You also get the stat screen on your OSD.
So normally I get the stat screen disarmed by switch, and then it would be
disarm by landing.
Auto disarm.
Disarm by landing. Yeah.
Okay, cool.
Exactly.
Yeah.
That's on by default. You can disable it again if you want to get back to the old behavior, but by default this is turned on. Another very important feature is the hardware in the loop. This is also very, very big. It came about the same time. I think it was also in the feature preview 1, if I remember correctly, that allows you to use a flight controller on your PC to control a virtual plane on your PC for X-Plane. And I think also, was it implemented? No, it was not implemented yet at this point for real flight, but X-Plane 11 and X-Plane 12 currently are supported.
Can you tell me what X-Plane is? Because I've heard you talk about it a couple times.
X-Plane is basically a flight simulator for real flight planes like Cessnas, Airbus, all that stuff, like flight simulator basically. But in X-Plane, there is the possibility to design your own aircraft, and we have a few. One AR Pro mock-up I made as a Delta Wing to fly in X-plane and use the real flight physics in there, or the realistic flight physics, as good as possible. It's still hard to do because these flight simulators, the simulation system is made for big aircraft with multiple meters wingspan, hundreds or thousands of kilograms of weight, not for small FPV wings. So it's a little bit harder to do. It's not perfect, but it is usable for sure. And this not only helps developers to test new features like navigation stuff, waypoint stuff, all that kind of stuff. For example, Darren's waypoint triggers he implemented, he basically only tested in X-plane first, and after everything worked there, he went to the field and it worked the same way. It worked perfectly fine. So this is a really important feature also for users to just get used to INAV. You can set up your plane there, you can configure your flight controller, you can test like telemetry widgets on your radio if you want to set them up. So or you just test fly waypoint missions, for example, on a virtual landscape that represents the real world landscape, just to see if your mission is correctly set up and your plane doesn't crash at the ground.
So is this a commercial piece of software? Is this shareware? What is this?
Yeah, X-plane is commercial software. You have don't let me lie, 15 minutes or 30 minutes? I think 15 minutes after installation demo. So right. You can launch you can launch X-plane, you can load into a map, and you have 15 minutes before the flight gets cancelled and throws you back into the menu, and then you have to restart the application, and then you get another 15 minutes. So you can use it in a loop. If you want to use it for longer than 15 minutes, you have to buy it. X-plane 11 is often at a discount, like 30 euros or so.
Oh, so
it's not too expensive.
Wow, that's great.
Yeah, and X-plane 12, I think it's currently in early access, if I am not mistaken, and it comes for the usual full game price, like 60 euros. But I mean, if you want to try out things, 60 euros for that simulator to test and train stuff is better than losing a plane for 600 euro, for example.
You can use your radio,
Yes, you connect your receiver to your flight controller directly,
right?
Like you would in a real plane. So all the simulator is doing is basically simulating all the hardware around your fixed wing.
So you said you connect your receiver to a flight controller, but that's on your PC. How do you connect it to your PC?
Just by USB. Just plug it in, INAV boots up, and the X-plane simulator will have a plugin, and that plugin checks your COM ports. If there's an INAV flight controller, if it sees it, it notifies you, hey, INAV hardware in the loop flight controller detected, and then you just click connect, and you're done. There's no specific setup needed. The only thing you need to set up on the flight controller is a basic wing mixer, and I think, a wing mixer, your modes and your flight controls, and basically everything you would set up on a normal airplane as well.
It doesn't need OSD, so
of course, also the OSD, everything gets simulated.
Oh wow, so you can have your full OSD setup.
Exactly. Now in the latest versions, it even supports the HD OSD fonts from
Zero HD.
How's the guy's name? I forgot the name. The HD fonts for WTF OS and HD0 and Woxnay, they are even supported. There's a special OSD release for that.
Wowzy, wow. I love this.
Yeah, so this is really cool. There's also a video linked in the article. Okay, let's quickly...
I mean, how cool is that? INAV 6 together with the new Woxnail low-light cameras, and now we have a brilliant HD experience on INAV. How cool is that?
Yeah, I mean, if you just have a flight controller, you can even, I mean, maybe you have somewhere an old flight controller with a ripped off pad, for example. USB, of course, has to work, but you have ripped off a power pad or a UART pad and you cannot use it anymore. Or maybe your barometer or your gyro on the board has failed. just recycle it. Plug in USB in, flash INAV, and you can use it for the simulator still, because all these sensors don't have to work in hardware. They are simulated by the simulator plugin.
Man, we're getting that right after the show. This sounds amazing.
Yeah, absolutely. So are there questions in the chat so far? HRS, HD support, 3 pan servo OSD. Oh yeah, that pan servo OSD. I will come to that in a moment. Landing detection, the angle I'm looking. Okay, people are talking now about the... So sorry that I get distracted right now, because usually someone else is talking when I check the chat. But there's no
usually what
right
happens. Usually what happens is we have Mark check the chat out as we're talking to a guest or something like that. So we caught up on all the questions as of right now. If you have questions, feel free to jump in and ask them on there. And you can ask Mark about his new beard if you want to.
and Steve today has glasses on, so he can actually read the chat. That's a good thing.
we forgot one biggie.
What?
Because Steve has new glasses. I assume he got them for his birthday yesterday.
Oh, yes.
Did he?
Yeah, 21 yesterday. That was,
21.
It's like my 35th time doing this. The first time it wasn't that good doing it, but now, look, thank you, everybody.
Happy birthday to you.
Thanks.
Happy birthday to you.
Thank you. Yeah, it was exciting to see INAV 6.0 roll out on my birthday, and that was just really...
what a present.
Yeah, what a and also it was like, yesterday was the first day that it was actually sunny out. It wasn't raining, so... First thing I did is got out and went flying INAV in the morning, and I got flying INAV again today. So I'm looking forward to flying a hell of a lot more. And now I remember the plane I was flying. I had not flown this one for a while, and I'm like, oh, the OSD is set up wrong, and I already have it loaded. I kept I keep all my OSD layouts on a file, so I had to update this, and the rudder's backwards, so I had to update that. And I'm like, man, this is a perfect plane for INAV 6.0. I can hardly wait to get that. So that's going to be one of the first planes to get updated with it, which is, maybe the thing we should talk about, because right now we're all dreaming about actually flying a lot more. So what are we going to be flying this summer?
That's a big question. That's really a big question. Because, the obvious answer would be a mini drag for me personally, because I sell that stuff. But that would be a little too easy, because I'm now working on a nano drag with the extended wing set and the boom kit. But it's my test bed for the Kevlar coating, and the actual Kevlar mini drags will be actually bulletproof, not just a marketing goodie. They will be coated in Kevlar, which is at the end lighter than traditional laminate and in color, etc. And you could basically shoot them with a shotgun and they don't come down. So that's quite an interesting feature. I have a Ventus 3, 4.8 meters. I want to convert to walk snail and have a head tracker in the cockpit. And one of my buddies wants to make a live cockpit for it, so that I just have a 3D printed instrument panel, and the instruments, the actual instruments are no instruments, but they are just display elements, so that I have live instruments in that. And I'm really looking forward to this, doing live thermal soaring with HD video on INAV. So that would be my planes for the summer, I think.
So regarding INAV 6, I think we even have mostly covered all the features now. We talked about a lot of stuff before. Yeah, hardware in the loop.
What are you flying this summer?
Me? Oh,
yeah.
That's
what are you flying, Mark?
That's a good question. I mean, I have still an unassembled Nano Dragon in a box. That's
Shame
not
on you.
finished. Beside that, I don't know yet. Actually, I have no plans about any new plane at the moment. Just ideas about testing new tech. For example, experimenting with ground-based altitude hold on a fixed string with the 40-meter lidar, and doing some experimenting with the Bixler and Autoland stuff like
Josh
that.
is working on a Graugans kit. If you
Okay.
If that could be interesting for you.
I have too many planes already. I have no room
For
for
all of
them.
you who don't know what a Graugans is, you all know the Strix Goblin. And the guy who made the Strix Goblin, or designed it, also, of course, made the Nano Goblin. But he made an 80-inch wing version of the Goblin, which is the Graugans, which is a German name for Grey Goose. And it's basically a Goblin with 80-inch wings. Brilliant design. And Josh is working on a very, very small series of it. Much to be seen when he comes out with it.
Michelle is right now remembering me of something about something. Spec ring for Mappen.
Yeah, good idea.
I have no spec ring, but I actually have a sub-spec ring, a small one.
I'll give you one.
Yeah, I have a sub-spec ring, a small one. I think it only needs a receiver and the linkages. Everything else is done. And it's in that state like 1.5 years now.
Yeah, I
should finish that.
I still have 3 unfinished kits here. You can have one.
Okay. Okay, let me get one, the one quickly, and I can show you. But yeah, besides that, as I said, I have no real plans. I might build a second AR Pro actually. When I had the idea to make my first one here as a bashing setup with more power to really wrap around, and build the second one, because the second one is one of the old molds still. It has a little bit lighter foam, to build a new long range rig. Maybe, I am not sure yet. But yeah, I have no big plans this year.
It's just other than putting INAV 6.0 on all your planes, right?
Oh yeah, that will be some work. Especially because for INAV 6, I will start completely from scratch this time. On older INAV versions, sometimes I modified my base setup. I usually do that. I port over on all planes, like my modes, my receiver type, and all that stuff, and in-flight stuff. But I think I might start completely from scratch, including all the tuning, all from scratch for every single plane, and that will take some time.
And you, Steve, I heard you got yourself a Twin Star.
Oh yeah, so that was kind of it was kind of a last minute deal. Earlier this month, I got a phone call from one of my dealers, and he said, "Hey, we're going to the Perry Swap Meet. This is in Perry, Georgia. Would you like to go? It's next weekend." And I was like, "Okay." And so I went there, and essentially what it was a national fairground. And so there were like these big fairground halls, probably 5 or 6 of them, from end to end with used RC planes.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah, all sorts of these deals going on. I mean, everything. I mean, they had huge planes, things that you can never bring home with you, even if you had a van, down to, small things. And I'm walking through the hall and I see, oh my God, there's a Twin Star sitting here. And I'm like, I don't know how I'm going to get this home, but I need this. So it was like $30. And so I gave the guy $30, and I told my dealer, hey, I can't get this home. I can't get it on the plane. Can you take it for me back to your place in Texas? So my Twin Star is in Texas right now, and I'm trying to figure out how to get it back from Texas to California. But I'm really excited about this plane, and hopefully maybe what we can do is I might talk him to bring it out to Joe Knoll. Maybe we can throw it in one of the boxes as we return stuff.
Yeah, really nice.
I just remember I have one small project coming up right now. It's a new old plane, basically. And that's this little baby here.
Remember that.
The all-black ZOHD Drift. What was the name? Dark Breeze? Yeah, the Dark Breeze version. With a new foam. It's basically the AR Pro foam. if you take it that way, with a small design change on the ailerons. And I might put my first digital setup into that one with the Voxnay Whoop VTX, because for some reason, when it comes to digital FPV, I'm a professional procrastinator. I have never built in the HD0 any plane after 1.5 years now that I have it. And wow. I have the Voxnay system also since December now, and I also haven't put it into any plane yet. Yeah, actually, I'm lying. I put it in a plane, but I didn't finish the plane yet because I messed it up and I have to reprint it.
Yeah, but then the HD0 system would be perfect for the spec wing for Mappen.
I don't think that I will use the HD0 actually, because my receiver has this issue with the sparkles all over the image. So I don't really trust that receiver. That's the main reason why I never put it anywhere. But yeah, I might put Voxnay into the Drift, into the new one, to try out HD with that before I start getting more VTXs.
Before I forget, I should mention that when I was at the Perry Swap meet, I had not one, but two guys came up to me and said, "Man, I love you on Wing Talk. You guys are great." So that was fantastic. And then at just last week at the Florida Jets, there was Tom, I believe is his name, was on the flight line. He was the guy that essentially calls out landings. He kind of works with the other guys there to make sure that the planes don't crash into each other on the runway. Huge fan of ours. He was telling his son how much he really loves the show. His son was there. So thank you for watching. Thank you for the shout outs. We certainly do appreciate it.
There's a question in the chat, by the way, from Itzy Gronin. Will it be possible to run auto launch for an airplane with wheels on the runway? It is already possible. It's not intended to be used that way, but it's totally possible with some tweaking. And I did that before with the Bushwrecker I've now disassembled with that foam board plane. What you just do is you use the auto launch idle throttle to start the roll, and at a certain speed with the speed trigger, that's by default, I think 3 meters per second. You can set that to 5, 6, 7, or 8 meters per second. You then just trigger the launch throttle and lift off as soon as the plane starts rolling fast enough. And I think with INAV 6 now and the rudder removed from the servo auto trim, from the continuous servo trim completely, you could even use that with a nose or tail gear steering, and it should stay on the runway. In theory, I've not tried that yet.
I was going to ask you that, because I mean, a lot of these runways that I've seen, they have like potholes practically where the planes hit them with their nose wheels, and then they can get turned sideways slightly.
Yeah, I think the problem right now is that INAV has, because it's not a native feature to use auto launch from the ground, INAV has no steering support. But I'm just thinking that maybe you can do one thing if you use the programming feature and you make 2 pit profiles, and they both have to be identical, but the second pit profile you use on the ground while auto launch is active has a high integral value on your rudder, and also controls the steering servo. Then you could use that to keep the line centered on the ground. when it's rolling, and as soon as the liftoff is detected, so the altitude changes to maybe more than 2 or 3 meters, then the pit profile is switched to the first one that disables the integral on the rudder. That could work pretty much to keep the plane on track on the runway.
Using logical conditions.
Yeah, with the logical conditions. Yeah, you have to use a high integral on the ground, especially because the plane is slow, so you have very little rudder authority. So you have to use very high rudder pits to keep it on track. But you need to disable this or lower the pits as soon as the plane is airborne, because otherwise rudder behaves weirdly when integral is enabled.
Yeah, I mean, like for example, in the radio setups I deal with, we have something called flight modes and a lot of radio manufacturers have this as well, where what happens is when you're in the first flight mode, it's your takeoff flight mode, and so your flaps are half down and your elevator's up slightly, so you take off, and as soon as you're out of that, you flip the switch and you're to your second flight mode, where the flaps come up and the elevator levels out, and you're into maybe high rates, dropping into low rates for third flight mode, and then landing mode in your fourth profile or fourth flight mode. So I was wondering, that's the kind of stuff you set up. And each one of these are individually trimmed. I know we don't really deal with trims in INAV, but to have different profiles set up for different flight characteristics, is that something we've ever toyed with?
Yeah, that's totally possible. I think there are even people putting it so far. I've seen one guy in the INAV fixed-wing group, I think, who used the programming feature with the 3D speed to switch between multiple pit profiles depending on the airspeed, to have some kind of airspeed-based pit attenuation. So yeah, you can do a lot with this programming framework if you just have let your fantasy go with you.
Yeah, that's kind of funny. Is like I had a friend who every time I posted flight videos onto my personal Facebook profile, the guy would say, I mean, I get these messages from him like, why are you playing around with toy planes? Why don't you go to the airport, get yourself a real GA pilot's license, and take this up? These are toys. They're never going to be anything worthwhile. And, I mean, it was just kind of very judgmental and harsh, right? I happened to be out in Atlanta after this Perry Swap meet. I spent the day with him, and I said, hey, we're like 2 miles away from your local flying field. Let's go over there and take a look at it. And then we came back and we talked about the radio. We talked about all the possibilities that you can have, even with a basic plane these days, all the mixing you can do and all the different flight modes and everything else. And then the next day I'm getting messages from him. Hey, is this a good first plane, right? To start out with? And, so.
Yeah, I really understand that feeling that when somebody is condescending and is talking down on you because of your playing with toy planes. Let's be honest. There is a considerable amount of manned aviators today who started with toy airplanes. Neil Armstrong, the first guy on the moon, started with toy airplanes. So what's the deal? And the other thing is, unmanned aerial vehicles are the future. We will have a considerable amount of aviation unmanned in the future, and I can just guess how many people will get introduced into their new job fields in unmanned aviation by having a hobby entrance. So.
Yeah,
I don't get it why people condescend that way.
What's also interesting is, how many people I've spoken to who are retired airline pilots who jump into the RC after they retire, or they're playing with it while they're still flying, but they really get into it afterwards, and they're moving up to turbine jets, and they're moving into gliders and all these other things. So, I mean, they're not toys. I mean, that the furthest thing, when you have a plane that is the size of a Honda Civic and costs as much as a Honda Civic flying around, not everyone has $30,000 in their back pocket, and so they take these things extremely seriously. And your gliders, I mean, Henrik keeps pointing out these gliders. How much of there is a good glider, like a really good glider these days, Henrik, like a F5J?
Depends really on what you're going for. A good recreational glider that is not a scale type glider is in the 4-meter wingspan ballpark. The 4-meter wingspan, or 12 foot for you guys over there, is more or less the sweet spot. And a good 4-meter glider you can have for 1.5 to 2K all in flying. But if you want to have an F5J machine, you can actually compete with. You're in the 4K, 5K ballpark. If you have a glider that is actually a scale model of a small one, you can easily go 5 digits easily. And let's be honest, those are really, really sophisticated machines. It's the complete construction of the plane is absolutely high tech, and the airfoil is high tech. Braking systems, flap systems, retract systems, retractable EDFs, retractable turbines, retractable propellers, single blade propellers with blade positioning systems. All that is in the glider realm. So we have barely touched what people have been touching or flying with at the LOS fields in this regard, but we are quickly pulling up right now.
The one thing I always find interesting too is you talk to the scale guys, and they're talking about the motor they have in their planes, and like my kit was $1,000, and I'll ask them, how much do you have in your plane? And they're like, I got $2,000. So for like a good scale plane. Then we talk about servos, and they're like, oh, I can't spend over $30 on servos. Are you kidding me? Because I need like 8 of them. They're like, that's the one thing I think we have in common. And Henrik was the first one really to get on the whole thing about the cordless and the brushless servos. But I mean, the stuff that we deal with in our planes right now with INAV, a lot of these are like a good servo. Getting people to spend $15 on a servo is kind of a stretch, and these are cord servos.
Yeah, the thing is, it's no news. I'm a little bit a servo nerd, but the least amount of money you should pay for a servo is those $50. $15, I'm sorry.
15.
Yeah, the Emax ES09 MD for a small to, let's say, up to a meter wingspan, you can fly with them. They are okay. But they're not okay because they're metal gears. They're not okay because they are Emax. They are okay because the Emax guys were smart enough to put noble potentiometers in it. And you have perfect positioning. And that's important for your flight controller. Because when you're flying with a flight controller, you have constantly moving your control surfaces, because the flight controller tries to iron out the wind and the gusts, etc., etc. And
especially if you do manual pit tuning and you really want to have a sharp tune, then it's like shaking all the time.
And Emax, the ES09 MD are really, really the baseline, the absolute baseline. Do not go below that. And I have a few GDW servos in my shop I really love, but they are also budget servos. It's budget. We're talking about $30 for an 8 kilo servo. That's a budget servo. If you go with FSky, with those brilliant S-Bus servos they have, what are you looking at the moment? $60, $70 per servo?
Oh yeah, so they range anywhere from $48 to $80. The brushless servos are about $80.
Yeah, and so it's absolutely easy to spend $100 per servo if you're in a bigger size.
And that's cheap. I mean, MSK is going to be
MKS.
MKS. Yeah, $150. Salvac, same thing.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So Mark, you were onto something.
He's confused. I'm confused too.
Yeah, he's muted.
He's muted. We can't hear you, Mark. Mark, you're still talking. We don't hear you.
Yeah.
Anyways, so servos, yeah. The one thing I'll also say about servos is somebody posted like they had who was it? It was about 2 weeks ago. I had a beautiful, I think it was a Volantix plane or something like that, and it crashed because the servo died, right? And this is the time right now where if I were to convince you to where you should put your money into, if you have a plane, you absolutely love it, rip the servos out, especially if it's a Volantix. It sucks. I know you're putting good money after bad, it feels like, but if you have an airframe you love, it's a hell of a lot less work to do this than to rebuild it from scratch.
Absolutely. And it was a little tragic because everybody was telling him, just upgrade the servos, swap out your servos, go get good servos. And he assumed that a Metal Gear servo would be an upgrade. A Metal Gear servo would be an upgrade. So he went for the cheapest option of Metal Gears, and he got Tower Pro MG90S like for 1.5 bucks per each, and he got completely flamed by everybody. Just to throw away that junk, me including me. I'm sorry. I have a little. I feel a little sorry for it, but friends don't let friends fly MG90s.
Oh yeah, and a lot of those
Metal Gear MG90s, guys. Metal Gears is no quality trademark. Metal Gears is a must, and it's no, it's no.
And not all the gears are metal in those Metal Gears. Like the top gear is plastic and it strips, right?
Yeah, exactly. And digital is also not digital. We all know that. Digital servos are only analog servos in disguise, but they have better positioning with their chips in it. And the really important thing in servos is ball bearings and good potentiometers, or even Hall sensors.
Yeah. Okay. The one thing I would say is if you are, let's say you've got INAV dialed in, you got a plane you like, you're into maybe your third or fourth INAV plane. Now's the time for you to build that dream plane where you upgrade. It's going to cost a little bit more money than you want to spend. And this is time where you put in the best quality motor you can get and the best servos. It's something you absolutely look forward to flying all the time. And so it's a good time to do that, especially with INAV 6.0 coming out. Mark, are you back?
You can hear me again?
Yes.
I hear you now.
Okay, great.
You raised your finger. We thought you had some important things to say.
I had some audio issues, but it should work now. Okay, I think it's all fine now. What I wanted to just point out earlier, when you said, hey, good servos can be in the €100 ballpark or even bigger. For high quality servos, we are still talking about 12mm size. So if you go even bigger, then you're easily in the 300, 400, 500 euros ballpark, where these big like 10, 12 meter scale models fly, for example. And I totally agree with Henrik on that when he says what the my Skype NDA here is still 1 second. Now it should work again. When the regarding servo classes, and for me, for the cheap builds, for example, the AR Pro, the stock servos are completely fine. They are analog servos, not digital, but they are fast, precise, totally fine. And beside that, if I have to buy servos for a cheap setup, then I also go for the Emax ES08 or ES09, for example. And if I have anything with more value, for example, where I really want to put an expensive camera on it or something like that, like the PTK servos here, these with the metal gaze, are basically my go-to. And they are also fast and precise. I can select if I want to have a very fast one with a good torque, or if I want to have a really strong one that's just slower, like for a big gentle build or a very self-stabilizing airframe that doesn't need high pits, for example. In a mini drag, for example, just I would build these 9497 servos. These are a little bit slower but stronger to withstand higher speeds and more torque. And for the clouds, for example, where I want to have that very fast pit stabilization to counteract any gust or wind, I just use this faster ones.
How many volts are they?
They can run up to 7.2 volts.
Okay, yeah. So the range of voltage is up to 8.4 volts for that's tend to be the higher end servos, and a standard servo is what you're talking about. They're pretty big servos. That is what we call standard. Everything is either mini or micro. I believe these are we call micro servos when you get down to
funny enough, what we consider as a standard is not standard at all. What we consider in the FPM community consider standard is a micro servo.
It's 12 millimeter.
Yeah, 12 millimeter. And the next bigger size is the 15 millimeters. And that's a mini servo. That's really a mini servo. And these really big chunks of servo that are 40 by 40 by 20 millimeters are the standard size. That's the standard C507 Graupner, if anybody of you is old enough to know these. Those were the servos that were delivered with the transmitters like 35 years ago as a standard. And that's the standard servo.
Yeah, this is absolutely right.
Crytone FPV says in the chat, I have ES09 in my important models and use SG and MG90s in the not so important models. You can ban me now if you want. Please tell me that your AR Pro that just flew 20 kilometers out uses at least the ES09.
Yeah, there's you did mention that that company I work for that makes the servos. I did at one point the Metal Gear, when we got to the brushless ones, I told the management, I said, listen, I can't endorse these yet. They're not ready to go. And here's the problems. They need to be fixed. And, I said also, when you fix them, then I can get behind them. You'll never hear me shut up about them. And so I believe they're pretty close to being fixed right now. So if you follow me on those elsewhere, you will find out that I will start talking about these things quite a bit in the future. But yeah, so that is this year. Servo is going to be on the top of the list for me. But yeah, I think we're there. So yeah, servos are, but for us in the hobby, we deal with the micro servos. And yeah, the company makes micro servos, but realistically, the Emax servos are absolutely fine for what we do, as Henrik says. And I also like those, what was it, JX servos. They go up to 7.2 volts. If you can get yourself up to an 8.4 volt servo, a lot of the flight controllers from Maytech have, especially in the wing boards, will put out 8.4 volts, so we can use those. Mark, you're about to say something?
Yeah, I didn't want to interrupt you, sorry. But I think also one thing we really have to try is to get the community stop using the rate as a size measurement. There is no such thing like a 9-gram servo or 12-gram servo or whatever.
Yes.
There is no such thing, because these Votic I just showed are, for example, like 15-gram, but it's still a 12mm servos. And these Emax servos that are mentioned as a 9-gram servo actually rate 10-gram, and it's the same size. So yeah, these. I think it's good enough if we stay with the thickness, like 8mm, 12, 15, and so on. The rest is there are a few special things like these PTK glider servos that are very flat but wider in the size because of the type of gearing they use.
Right.
Beside that, we should really stop to use the weight of the servo as a measurement because it doesn't matter.
Yeah, the one servo that tend to be like in the Scale Warburg group is the high-tech HS 645 MGs. And they came out around 1998. And it's one of those things that people have been using for years. And it's like in their, all their planes. And it was messing, our telemetry was at 900 megahertz, was messing with it to the point that they were jittering. So, that was another thing we had to go back and say, can we turn down to 25 milliwatts? And, within 2 months, we had the firmware update fixed for that. So there's a lot of these old junky servos out there. That's another thing I should really mention. And there's some old servos. The cheap servos you want to stay away from, like the Tower Pro servos. But the old junky servos that people have been using for years, there's so much better stuff out right now. I would rather use one of the cheaper Chinese $20 servos that are Metal Gear, that are high torque, that are everything else, than that high-tech HS 645. Even high-tech is trying to say, we have better stuff out now. You guys should move for $10 more. You can move up to the digitals. And people still buy these things by the truckload.
By the way,
we mustn't forget too. Sorry, Mark.
Yeah, go ahead.
Actually, there is quite a fun fact. The LOS guys who don't fly stabilized have invest more money into their servos than we do. And the thing is, flying with a flight controller and then in a stabilized mode, even acro or an auto launch, etc., has constant stress on the servo. So when you're flying with a flight controller, you have to actually go and buy a better servo than the LOS guy would do. So don't cheap out on that. Cheap out on the motor. Cheap out on your ESC. Cheap out on your radio system, etc. But don't cheap out on servos and linkages.
There's one thing I think I recently learned, and I actually have to admit that I was at fault at that topic for years now. Is do servos, or what happens if you use a too high signal rate on servos? In the past, I always thought, okay, for example, in INAV, you can have the default 150 hertz. You can set it to 100, 150, and 330 hertz, I think, for the signal rate. And everything that I experienced in the past was that if the servo doesn't support the signal rate, it would just start to jitter or is not controllable at all. It doesn't move. Right. But I think a too high signal rate can indeed damage the servo. The reason why I came to that conclusion is, Henrik, you remember these that you hate so much, and I also started to hate. Because I have one of these on my XUAV Clouds as a tilt servo, because I needed a very small, compact one just to tilt the FPV camera. And I have melted 2 of them. They literally melted the housing because they became hot like hell. And I then switched from the 6 volt I run on my servo rates to a 5 volt regulator, and the second one also melted, even on 5 volts. The only thing that I have different on that plane compared to, what other plane was it? I think the Dart 250 has the same ones, is that I run 330 hertz update rate on the Clouds. And on the Dart, I run 50 hertz update rate. And on the Dart, they have no problem. And on the Clouds, they melt. They are controllable. They work completely normal, but they get very, very hot. And I think that's the signal update rate for these digital servos. Somehow they can't handle it, or they have some jitter that's not visible on the outside, but still induced into the motor. So that's something you really have to consider. And I will try it again with one of the partially melted, but still working ones, and see if the lower update rate of 50 hertz solves that problem.
Is that something we can work on as far as INAV is concerned, to maybe have a 200 update rate as opposed to 330?
No,
so
that won't happen, because you have timers in groups, and on many flight controllers, like on the F765, you have to have a full group of servos, like usually a group of 2 or 4 servos at once, that have to run on the same update rate. But I only, for example, for the pan and tilt, I only need 1 or maybe 2 for the pan and tilt to run at the lower update rate, while the rest controls the plane, so that's not feasible. That would be too different to handle with the targets afterwards. So yeah, the only idea that I have that might work is if I put in, for example, an Arduino in between and read the signal from the flight controller at 330 hertz and then output 50 hertz to the actual servo.
So that's a good, okay, that sounds good. So I want to just ask you now that, what are you going to plan to do as far as what's your first plane you're going to look forward to flying with INAV 6.0? That, now that you've got it out there, what are you going to update to? What's the first one you're going to really test it out with? Oh, the old classic, huh?
Yeah. Wait, let me switch camera. Yeah, this one, and because of what's on top of it. The CEA6 camera gimbal. I want to see if that can handle the airspeed of the AR Pro for flight. So this will be the reason why I fly this one next. And it is already on a developer version of INAV 6. So it will be an easy upgrade.
There you go.
After that, of course, the Bixler, that's also my developer platform. I think the Bixler is the only one that's maybe on a release candidate 1. I'm not sure right now. Yeah, and then from there I go just slowly through my whole fleet, because, as I said, I have to. I don't have to, but I will retune every single plane, completely reset it, set it up from scratch. So it will be basically one plane for one flight day, and then run like 5, 6, 7 batteries through it and get everything dialed in to the last point.
Are you gonna go through and like clean up the wiring on your planes?
No, I don't think that I will change anything on the actual hardware. Yeah, the AR Pro, of course, because the wiring of the gimbal. But beside that, I will never change any wiring on the Bixler again, because that's a rat's nest. It's literally stuffed in there.
Yeah, I know.
And I will not touch it again if not needed.
It flies beautifully, though, right?
Oh yeah, it really flies nice. I mean, I had some people telling me when I did the auto land with the logic conditions, some people said, yeah, that's not representative. That's a Bixler. Even without a flight controller, you just cut the throttle and lands itself.
So, it does. Yeah, absolutely.
So I guess I have to retest that with the AR Pro, because that's why I want to put that. Where did I put it? That 40-meter LiDAR into the AR Pro. I think it's somewhere here. I don't know where I put it now. But yeah, and then retest that with the AR Pro and see if it behaves as good.
There was one of the planes, was the Sky Hunter, or I saw it looked like a Bixler, but it was an older plane. So it had center fuselage pusher on it, and I saw this at a hobby store in Florida, and I was like, wow, this thing's really cool. And it kind of had the wings like a Bixler 3, but it had a carbon fiber shaft, and I was really intrigued by it. I should have taken a photo of it.
Easy Star? Maybe?
No, it had a huge wingspan. I mean, it must have been 2 meters.
Okay, I don't know.
So it was like someone either took a Sky Hunter and modified. That wasn't a Sky Hunter, though. Anyways, it was really a cool plane. And I was wondering, I looked around for it. I couldn't find it anymore. Maybe this was something from 5 years ago. There were a lot of those big planes back around 2016, 2017. 8 years ago, 7 years ago, that were really the FPV were big planes, and then when we got into 2020, they got small, like the Ranger, right?
Henrik, what do you have there? Your AR900?
Yes, the trusty old AR900. I love this thing. It's actually my first FPV plane, still alive. I treated it right well, but I am flying it at the moment on RC3. I haven't had the opportunity to update it today to the final version. I wanted to fly it this afternoon, but I had to build a swing for the little one. So more important stuff got in the way, and I'm flying this one because I love it. It's still my daily driver.
Perfect. All right, guys. Well, I tell you what, this was a good show. I think we're going to call it quits here. It's been 2 hours. I want to thank you guys for being on. Thank everyone for watching. INAV 6.0 is out. Download it. Run, don't walk. Also,
there's no excuse. No excuse not to update.
Yeah. In fact, we're not even going to help you anymore if you don't have INAV 6.0. If you crash, it's your own dumb fault. You know.
Yeah, that should be mandatory. You should Mark. You should refuse any support below 6.0.
Buy the plane again, rebuild it, put 6.0 on this time,
and come back. Now shut up. Get lost.
just a quick side note. People might still ask for older version. That reminds me of a guy I had a discussion with him like a year ago or so in another group, and he was complaining that his crossfire had an issue. His crossfire was behaving weirdly in some instances, and he had sometimes fail safe and didn't recover and stuff. And I asked him after a while, hey, what version do you running? And he had a version on there from like 2018 or so. So really, really old firmware. And then he complained, yeah, they have to fix that, but I don't want to update to the latest version. Why doesn't the old version from back then work properly? And he really wanted that TBS fixes his old firmware so he doesn't have to update to the latest one.
Yeah, sounds about right.
That was really strange.
Oh, but get that all the time. Yeah.
But yeah, update to INAV 6. Just do it. You won't regret it. Just look at the posts in the group, INAV group, INAV fixed string group. Besides some people for some reason having trouble setting up the OSD, but trust me, it works. Darren has a perfect video to show how to set up digital FPV on INAV 6. And besides that, everyone is happy so far. We have had not a single issue reported for months now, or at least no critical issues. And all that was reported was fixed before the final release. We had a long testing phase.
This will be the best flying year ever.
Is there a prompt now for the not letting me arm in a navigation mode?
Yeah, it should say disable navigation first. Yeah.
Okay, that would be nice because I'd look a lot less dumber.
I mean that notification that you cannot arm when navigation is on was always there, but if you had enabled permanent auto launch, this blocker was overcome, so you could arm in navigation modes. Up to INAV 5.1, but this is also now not possible anymore, so you have to be outside of any GPS system mode to arm your craft.
And an auto launch for every plane you got as well. I learned the hard way. We want to do that.
Yeah, I've seen so many people now maidening with auto launch with no problem. Even our CSHIM Mario, he just released a new video of his Dolphin maiden, Atomos Dolphin with auto launch. It just goes up like a rocket. On. By the way, INAV 6 has new auto launch default values that I've put in there that should work for most planes pretty well.
And the defaults you put into INAV 6.0.
Yeah, in the plane preset. So if you set up a flight controller from scratch, you can even use the default auto launch values now to launch your plane. You don't have to guesstimate some starting values right now. The only thing that's not enabled is the idle throttle, because we don't want to have in any situation the motor spinning when you throttle up and you have not actively changed the setting beforehand.
That's big news, Mark. Why did we wait 2 hours and 8 minutes for you to tell us about that?
Yeah,
I just remember the first 5 minutes. You know, hey, listen, auto launch is new.
I think I made that change in December or so I forgot about it.
Oh, great. Well, everyone, thank you for watching, and we'll catch you next time on Wing Talk.
Bye-bye.